Act 1, King of the Coast. Soundscape. A growling bass layer building in power, joined by the frenetic staccato of a surf guitar. The metallic sound of lockers slamming in rhythm is heard. My kingdom ended at the high school parking lot gates, but inside, I was untouchable. If you had passed through there in 2024, you would have spotted me in a heartbeat. I was the guy wearing his varsity jacket, even in 80-degree heat, just for the weight of the embroidered patches on the sleeves. Cream leather, navy wool, and that number 10 that seemed to shine brighter than the rest. My style, it was a mix of Ivy League clean and seaside casual. Always a crisp white t-shirt, selvage denim cuffed just enough to show off my asphalt-worn Vans, and that smile, the smile of someone who never had to apologize for being there. High school was my aquarium. I knew every corner, from the equipment room where we'd hide to smoke before practice, to the principal's office. She'd always give me a pat on the back, asking if my knee was holding up. I remember the regional finals. 10 seconds left, mud clinging to my cleats like tar. I launched a 40-yard spiral, an impossible shot, a curve that seemed to suspend time. When the ball hit my receiver's hands, the roar of the stadium vanished, replaced by a pure silence, before the explosion of joy crashed down on me. That night, we ended up on the gym roof with a cooler of lukewarm beers, watching the city lights, telling ourselves that if life were a playlist, we had just invented the opening track. I was the go-to for everything. I was the one mediating beefs between the skaters and the rich kids, the one they'd ask which track to drop to make the party blow up. I had that quiet confidence of those who have never known rejection. My locker was overflowing with notes, phone numbers on napkins, and the scent of athletic rub. I spent my Sundays in the water, waiting for the perfect set. Surfing was my only school of humility, but even then, I thought the ocean obeyed me. I had that magnificent arrogance of people who haven't hit a wall yet. I already saw my name in lights, etched into the steel of a glass tower, never realizing that in the real world, nobody gives a damn who the high school football captain was. Act 2, Rare Oxygen. Soundscape. A dull, almost imperceptible hum, like the sound of an electrical transformer. The surf guitar from the beginning is now a distorted, distant echo, eventually muffled entirely by the hiss of the ventilation system. The tower lunged toward the sky like a steel fingernail. Down on the sidewalk, I still had that golden boy stride, chest out, footsteps sure. But the moment I pushed through the heavy glass revolving door, the air changed. It became heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. The lobby was a desert of gray marble, polished so fine you could see your own distorted reflection beneath your feet. An artificial silence reigned, the kind of silence that doesn't exist in nature. At the reception desk, a man whose face looked like it had been smoothed with a clothes iron handed me a magnetic badge. A small piece of white plastic with my last name misspelled. It was my birth certificate in this new world. I had become visitor number 432. The elevator was a chrome capsule. There were 6 of us inside, all compressed, but no one looked at each other. I caught my reflection in the stainless steel wall. My suit, a post office gray worsted wool, betrayed me. My arms, built for throwing spirals or paddling past the break, were cramped. The seams at the armpits tugged every time I moved. I felt like a thoroughbred forced into a pony ride harness. I adjusted my tie, a perfect Windsor knot my mother had tightened that morning, and felt a drop of cold sweat slide down my spine. It wasn't stage fright. It was claustrophobia. The elevator ding sounded like a death knell. 42nd floor. Stepping out, I was hit by the light. A raw office light that creates no shadows, leaving nothing to chance. It was an infinite open space. Hundreds of individual cubicles separated by 20-inch high gray felt walls. It looked like a labyrinth for lab rats, but with $10,000 coffee machines. I walked to the waiting area, and that's where the doubt became a physical certainty. I looked at the people. A guy, probably not much older than me, was typing on his keyboard with a robotic frenzy, bloodshot eyes fixed on an Excel spreadsheet. Beside him, a woman drank a green juice with a vacant expression, her gaze lost in the void beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. They looked like they were under anesthesia. No laughter, no locker room banter, not even a whisper of life. Just the click-clack of keys, the hum of computer servers, and the occasional sharp snap of a stapler. I sat on a designer leather chair as comfortable as a block of granite. I checked my watch. 2:25 p.m. My interview was at 2:30 p.m. I imagined my life here. Arriving at 8:00, leaving at 8:00. Spending my best years, the ones where my body is at its peak strength, filling boxes in the cloud. I thought of my board, probably gathering dust in the garage. I thought of the smell of salt on my skin after a dawn session. Everything here was disinfected. You smelled nothing, except for the pine forest synthetic scent wafting from the air vents. I told myself, if I walk through that office door, if I get this job, I die. Not all at once, but little by little, day after day, until this suit becomes my actual skin. My hands shook slightly on my knees. I was looking for an excuse to leave, an imaginary illness, when a sound tore through the muffled atmosphere. A scream. A cold, humiliating cry of rage coming from the corner office, the one with the solid oak door. Act 3, the wreckage of respect. Soundscape. The hum of the AC abruptly fades behind a leaden silence. Then, a voice rises, shrill, loaded with toxic contempt. The narrator's heartbeat is felt through a dull, irregular bass thud. The oak door wasn't fully closed, just enough to let the venom through. This wasn't just an office spat. It was a public execution. The voice of the boss, the man who was supposed to interview me, the finance guru, everyone worshipped, erupted, sharp as a razor. He was screaming at an employee, a man in his 50s I had passed at the coffee machine 2 minutes earlier. a man the age of my father. You are nothing. Do you hear me? You're a casting error. A useless line item I'm going to cross out with one stroke of my pen. Every word hit my stomach like a punch. Through the crack in the door, I saw the employee just standing there, motionless, shoulders slumped, head down, taking the humiliation with a passivity that made my blood run cold. He didn't fight back. He didn't answer. He was apologizing for existing. And the boss continued, savoring his power, relishing the methodical demolition of a human being over a layout issue or a missed deadline. I felt a physical pain, a burn that started in my throat and flooded my chest. It wasn't fear, it was a visceral revolt. I thought of my teammates on the field, the solidarity in the mud, the respect we gave each other even in defeat. Here, in this temple of luxury and success, respect was a currency that no longer held value. I looked at the other employees in the open space. Not one of them looked up. They all dove even deeper into their screens, like animals trying to make themselves invisible, while a member of the herd is devoured before their eyes. This collective indifference was even more revolting than the boss's screams. Was this the system? Was this success? Becoming a soulless predator or prey without dignity? A violent nausea washed over me. I felt the weight of my suit crushing my ribs. This gray fabric wasn't a winter's garment. It was the shroud of my freedom. If I entered that office, if I smiled at that man to get this job, I was becoming an accomplice. I was selling my honor for a 6-figure salary and a parking spot. The secretary looked at me, a mechanical smile on her lips. Sir, he will see you now. I stood up. My legs weighed a ton, but my mind was terrifyingly clear. I looked at her, then at that door where the breath of cruelty still lingered. I thought of the first plane out, the smell of kerosene, any place where you can still breathe air that hasn't been spat out by a machine. No, I said. My voice was calm, but it seemed to echo across the entire floor. I don't think so. No. I turned on my heel. I walked toward the elevator without looking back. With every step, I felt the threads of the system snap one by one. I ripped off my tie as the doors closed. In the stainless steel reflection, I finally recognized the guy from high school. The one who never leaves a teammate on the field. The one who knows when the wave is too polluted to surf. Act 4, the tearing. Soundscape. The heart rate quickens, a dull drumbeat mimicking tachycardia. The sound of the street returns, but distorted. Car horns sound like screams. The wind whistles in the ears like a storm. I didn't walk, I ran. The moment I hit the revolving door, the thermal shock scorched my lungs. Outside, the city kept spinning as if nothing had happened. But for me, the scenery was crumbling. I raised my hand frantically to hail a cab. My fingers were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my briefcase. Once in the back, I barked an address. Airport, Terminal 2, Drive. That's when the pulling started. A dull ache, as if my bones were being sawn in two. It was no longer office nausea, it was dread, the panic-stricken fear of the irreparable. I watched the people in suits on the sidewalks through the glass, and a voice in my head screamed, "What are you doing? You're throwing it all away. You're ruining everything for a misplaced ego. Go back, apologize, say you felt faint." Every red light was a torture. I felt the weight of my parents' expectations on my shoulders, heavier than any equipment bag. I could already see them tonight, asking me how the interview went. What was I going to tell them? That I ran away because a man yelled at another? It sounded so childish, so fragile. I felt like I was betraying the number 10 I used to be, the solid guy people relied on. Doubt was plowing through my gut, the terror of having no plan. I had one bag, my wrinkled suit, and my credit card. No destination, no job, no safety net. I looked at my hands, they were clammy and cold. I wanted to cry, the urge of a kid lost in a mall. Loneliness hit me. At this exact moment, I was disconnected from the world. I no longer belonged to the elite I was promised, and I was no longer the king of the high school. I was just a deserter in a yellow cab. I ripped off my suit jacket. I hated it, this dead skin clinging to my back. I balled it up next to me like a corpse. My heart was thumping so hard against my ribs, I thought it would burst. Would regret gnaw at me for the rest of my life? Would I end up sleeping on foreign beaches, wondering what I could have become if I had just shut my mouth and accepted the humiliation? The taxi hit the highway ramp. Signs read airport 10 km. This was the point of no return. I felt like I was jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. The smell of the taxi's leather, the AC spitting dusty air, the blur of the security barriers. Everything was becoming a prison. I wanted to get out. I wanted to leave. I wanted to vanish. I was terrified of being right, and even more terrified of being wrong. Act 5, the glass purgatory. Soundscape. The airport hustle is muffled, as if heard underwater. The obsessive mechanical clicking of old split-flap display boards turning is heard, mixed with an oppressive, monophonic synthesizer pad, creating unbearable tension. The terminal was a cathedral of drafts. I stopped dead in the middle of the flow of travelers, an island of stone in a river of rolling suitcases. The adrenaline of the flight had evaporated, leaving behind a leaden fatigue. My lungs burned. I took a deep breath of air, thick with kerosene and duty-free perfume, trying to calm the shaking that wouldn't leave me. I sat on a cold metal bench. Before me, the massive departures board. Tokyo, London, Rio, Casablanca, Reykjavik, names flashing like the beats of a panicking heart. Every destination was a possible life, and every possible life was a betrayal of the one they had written for me. In my right pocket, I felt the weight of my phone. It vibrated incessantly. Mom, Dad, the headhunter, my best friend. Every vibration was a hook trying to pull me back to shore. I pulled it out. The screen glowed with an aggressive light. A text from my father. So, the future. Are we celebrating tonight? That sentence nailed me to the floor. The future. word suddenly felt obscene. I looked at my hands. They were empty. I had nothing but this ridiculous briefcase containing my resume and an uneaten sandwich. I was hit by a vertigo so violent I had to close my eyes. If I stayed here 10 more minutes, I'd break. I'd call an Uber, go home, make up a lie, and Monday morning, I'd be sitting in that gray felt box, waiting for my soul to flicker out. The questions spun in loops, suffocating, acidic. Who are you if you aren't the perfect son? Who are you if you aren't the stadium hero? The silence inside me was terrifying. I didn't know. I only knew who I didn't want to be anymore. I stood up, my legs feeling like cotton. My phone vibrated one last time. A LinkedIn notification. Congratulate your friend on his new position. That was the final straw. A nervous laugh, nearly a sob, shook my chest. I walked toward the first stainless steel trash can I saw. Without thinking, with a gesture of surgical slowness, I dropped the phone inside. I watched it disappear under empty coffee cups. It was my last tether. The silence that followed in my head was the most beautiful sound of my life. I headed to the last-minute counter. The woman behind the glass looked at me, surprised by my rumpled suit and my wrecked face. Destination, sir. I looked up at the board. A line flashed. An immediate departure. No overthinking. No risk assessment. No career plan. That one, I said, pointing at the screen. The next one. She typed on her keyboard. The sound of the keys was different from the open space. It was the sound of a key turning in a lock. When she handed me the cardstock ticket, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in years, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Act 6, Flight of the Spectres. Soundscape. A low-frequency jet engine drone throbbing. The hiss of pressurized air. Intermittently, ghostly bursts of voices. His mother's laugh. The engine of his old car struggling to start. Then, a suspended high-altitude silence. In the pressurized cabin, I became a ghost. Sitting by the window, I stared at the darkness of the ocean below, and every mile tore me apart a little more. I didn't feel free. I felt like a criminal on the run. My anxieties, which I thought I'd trashed at the airport with my phone, had crawled into my seat. They whispered horrific images to me. I saw my old car, my faded Honda, parked haphazardly in front of the glass tower. I imagined it with a boot on the wheel, then towed away, ending up in a metal graveyard because no one would come to claim it. I saw my apartment, mail piling up, milk turning sour in the fridge, my surfboard alone against the white wall. But the worst was my mother. I saw her face collapse when, after 48 hours of silence, the police would knock on her door. We found his car, ma'am. His phone, too. We fear the worst. She would think I was dead, that her only son, her champion, had ended his life under the pressure of a first interview. That thought was an acid eating my insides. I was a coward, an egoist destroying everything in his path for an impulse. my friends, football, the parties, my name in the local paper. All of it was just a snake skin I had shed too quickly. The flesh was raw. At 30,000 feet, panic seized me again. I wanted to scream, to ask the pilot to turn back. It's a mistake. I'm sabotaging myself. I can't just disappear like this. It was pure madness. Juvenile recklessness disguised as destiny. I was a boy playing adult, and I had just burned it all down. And then the sky began to change color. A powdery pink, almost surreal, filtered through the window. The captain spoke. His voice was soft, distant. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into the island of Lumeria. Lumeria. The name echoed inside me like a forgotten musical note. I looked down. In the middle of the vast blue, a smudge of emerald green ringed by pure white. The clouds tore open. I saw the swell lines, perfect, regular, dying on the reef like the heartbeats of a soothed giant. When the wheels hit the tarmac, the shock brought me back to life. I exhaled a dust I'd been holding in for years. The air that rushed into the cabin when the door opened wasn't filtered. It was warm, heavy, with the scent of frangipani, and a salt so thick it felt like you could taste it. My suit was wrinkled. My life was in ruins. But as I stepped onto the Lumeria tarmac, I heard a sound. A distant guitar vibration, a reverb that seemed to rise from the ocean itself. The story was only beginning. And this time, I was the one holding the instrument,